Us today for another episode of Dreaming with the Devs is lead creator of Jamal's Adventure in the Sky. Thank you for joining us and feel free to tell us a little about yourself.
Hey, thanks for having me. So my name is Benjamin Thompson. My pronouns are he, him. So I'm currently an international student in the US. I'm studying my PhD in mathematics. And I guess I sort of really enjoy games and like thinking about the potential for the different stories they can tell, the different ideas they can communicate, and in particular, their sort of ability to communicate, to teach ideas as well as to teach concepts without sort of actually telling people that's what they're doing. And yeah.
Nice. That's pretty cool. So where are you originally from, if you're an international student?
Yeah, so my home is Australia. I spent most of my life there. I grew up there, went to school there, did undergrad there. Yeah, I'm not sure how well sort of versed people listening to this are in Australian geography. Like the majority of Australians live on the east coast of Australia.
Yeah, with like
in
Sydney.
particular.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, Sydney, so Brisbane. I think sort of Melbourne is an exception. That's kind of like on the south side. But yeah, I'm from the southeast coast.
You picked a heck of a time to study abroad with 2020 and the craziness happening in the United States right now.
Oh, absolutely. I feel very kind of lucky to be here and being able to study at such a time. And it has certainly been eye-opening almost every day, the types of things that go down.
Oh, I'm sure. Are you enjoying your time in the United States so far? Or
yeah, absolutely.
Certainly helps to have video games to keep us occupied when we're all stuck inside.
Yeah, it was particularly finding dreams during lockdown with COVID. Because like I'm currently I live in New York State, and having the ability to learn a completely new skill during a time when everyone was sort of inside, I was very lucky for that.
Yeah, that kind of leads us into our first question. So when exactly did you get your copy of Dreams, and how long have you been creating for the platform?
Yeah, so I think I first got a copy of Dreams around May. Dreams, like the existence of Dreams, was something I had known about for a while. I think it had been first announced sort of years before. I was quite familiar with Media Molecule's work. And so I know it was something that like I really should just check out to just to sort of keep my knowledge up to date with sort of games. And so like I downloaded it in May, and then I think when I reached, one of the great things about Dreams is that you don't have to, at least last time I checked, you don't have to like buy the entire thing in order to download it. You can actually download it sort of as a demo and check out some things of what people had created. So I started doing this. And I thought, this is really something I should just put some money into and actually explore what the full platform has. And then I think very soon after sort of playing around with other people's creations, I wanted just to see what the actual editing tools were like. And so like I started doing some of the tutorials similar to those in Little Big Planet 3. They were super easy to follow. Everything was super intuitive. So very soon I started making things. I think at this stage I still didn't have sort of an idea of a project in mind, but I thought I should just try making something small. So I think I had an idea that I kind of wanted to create an escape room of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I started just playing around with the editor to see if making this idea would be possible. And then within a couple of days, I was just full blown into development, and this is something I absolutely had to do, and I had to realize, and everything else could wait. And then awesome. I think about a month later, this Escape Room #1. I sort of released that, and
That's cool. Is
yeah, and then
is this
sort
your
of
first start with game development, or you mentioned Little Big Planet, but do you have any other computer programming experiences or other user generated game experience?
yeah. So I think, oh yeah. So yeah, this question kind of goes back a long time. There's been a couple of discrete points, but
Okay.
no time has been sort of as focused as I think the past sort of 4 months or so. So I think way back in the day, there was a Flash game known as like Ninja, or maybe it was just known as N.
Mhm.
And
I know what you're talking about.
yeah,
It was
and
the
so I think
like
this is
the 2D platformer, right?
yeah,
You
the
got
2D
yeah.
platformer, yeah. And so like at my school in Australia, there was one stage in which like everybody was playing this, whenever there was any class which was holding like a lesson with computers, like inevitably there would be some people playing this game. And so I got into this too. And then sort of one of my friends was also into this, but we started sort of exploring the kind of making side, and then we sort of created a couple of levels together. That was fun. And that kind of went away. So well, that would have been back in I think 2005 or 6, maybe 2007, sometime around then. And then a couple of years later, when Portal 2 was released, by Valve, the PC version of that game, I think a couple of months after it was released, had a level editor. And sort of at that time, I was this was something I wanted to check out. I think I was also like writing a review of that game for some sort of indie site, so I thought I really need to explore this aspect, and I sort of I did, and had a lot of fun with it. I think I only really designed one level for that, and it was like a lot of my games, I tend to design puzzles that are too difficult to begin with, and I need to figure out how to sort of scale them back. But I think a couple of people like that. I guess fast forward several years later, and I sort of coming up to the end of my undergrad. Like in 2006, I was doing my honors in pure mathematics at ANU, and the workload was sort of quite high. And I think in one weekend, I just wanted a complete break from mathematics, and I wanted to do something different. So I said, okay, I'm just going to just design a puzzle game this weekend. Kind of, yeah, who cares? Let's see what happens. And sort of out of this came, from starting with an idea of wanting to make a 3D game based on sort of Inception, in particular, like the mirror scene where like Adrienne and sort of Cobb go to the bridge, and then she sort of goes to a place and then forms a bridge out of mirrors. I wanted to sort of try and make a game out of that. That just turned into a discrete box pushing game somehow. But honors was in the way. I needed to write my sort of thesis, so that kind of got put to the side. And then in December of that year, once honors was over, I then thought, okay, like I need to code this up. I had a fair bit of experience with Python, and I think what's great about Python is, there's many good things about Python. One of the good things about it is that so many people use it, and so if you want to do something with it, it's highly likely someone has already done it before. And so in particular, I thought, okay, I want to make a game with this. I'm sure someone's thought about making a game with Python, and they had. And so there was in fact like software to do this called Pygame. There was also like a tutorial online that sort of explained like several examples of games made in sort of Pygame and how to do that. And so I then learned from that, and I was able to code up the game very quickly. I think from memory, it took about like 2 weeks to just code up the entire game in Python, which I thought was cool. I guess previously I thought, like coding a game from scratch will be completely impossible. Like not impossible, it will take a very long time. And then I realized, if you have some programming experience, it can actually just like take 2 weeks, provided the game is simple enough.
Yes.
Which mine was. And then one of the unfortunate things about Pygame is that it's a very kind of niche thing, and I wanted to be able to share this game with some of my friends and stuff without requiring them to like download Python and download Pygame and all this other stuff. And so I then said, okay, I need to rewrite this game. I think sort of the year later, I sort of got a job, and I was chatting to one of my sort of colleagues at work, and he talked about there's a New York professor who at NYU who does stuff, who has a YouTube series explaining how to program visually interesting things with sort of JavaScript. And so I thought, oh, this sounds great. Like, since sort of JavaScript is just on like a browser, if I reprogram my game in this, it will kind of be like universal. And so I started doing that using a Node.js library. That wasn't too bad. And then a couple of years later, I realized, why am I still like relying on this Node.js dependency when like Firefox, Chrome, so all of these browsers already have enough input tools. And then I rewrote the game yet again in that. So that was in 2006. And then I guess there was a hiatus, and then that kind of comes to Dreams. And then, I sort of made the escape room, and then immediately afterwards wanted to make something more accessible than just like esoteric art-based puzzles. And in particular, I really wanted to kind of like pay homage to like Media Molecule's legacy of sort of platformers. And so I thought, okay, the first kind of serious game I want to make is like a platformer.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really extensive and interesting history of game development leading up toward this. I used a little Pi Games myself back in the day, a mixed Snake clone. And like
Nice.
you, I wanted to like branch out into more mainstream ability to like get people to actually play it and stuff. So Dreams is obviously great for that. Liquid Planet. I'm trying to work on app development now. That's my current side project. But Dreams is really special because it allows you to obviously create three-dimensional space and also publish like seamlessly and easily, and anybody can do it. That's that's the magic of it.
Yeah, I agree. It's so amazing that the Dreams, just like, you don't have to worry about all of the nuances in sort of publishing and like engine and like engine rendering and all this other stuff. Yeah. It allows you just to spend all your time making things, and Dream says we'll do the rest of it, and deals with it pretty well.
Exactly. It's quite amazing. So let's chat a little bit about your latest creation, Jamal's Adventure in the Sky. What inspired you to create it?
Yeah. So definitely. So I think like when I'm sort of learning any new skill, I think in my opinion, like the best way to learn it is simply to kind of like jump into it and to make something with it. And so, although I sort of have some broader ideas about the types of games I want to make, sort of that communicate like various mathematical ideas, I definitely wanted to try making something a bit like more shorter, sort of a bit more concise. I also like the idea. This said, I wanted to, even if you're working on something that's say like an hour to like 2 hours long in terms of gameplay, like I realized this would still be like a lot of work, and also I wanted to be able to kind of switch everything up every once in a while. I didn't want to be like working on a single level for like an entire year or more, at least at this stage. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be able to work on something in small kind of chunks. And so I then had the idea of creating a platformer where sort of every level has a completely different mechanic and is about 10 to 20 minutes long. And this would allow me just to come up with lots of different ideas. These different ideas would allow me to learn different aspects of the software, sort of, as well as being a great creative exercise for me. And I think sort of platformers generally, there's a lot of like unexplored ideas, a lot of potential for stuff there. And also too, it seems to me as if the Dreams platform has really been built with platformers in mind. Like I kind of started, the first sort of stuff I created in Dreams was just really doing the exercises that Media Molecule suggests. We're doing the exercises, these kind of inquests. These first inquests say, try remixing this other platforming level in some interesting way, or just in any way at all. And so sort of once I kind of did one of those, I realized actually creating a platform in Dreams is relatively straightforward. Like I always want to say relatively easy. And so I felt I should just move in that direction and try creating something, instead of creating something like a completely different genre that I wasn't sort of comfortable with, creating something that everyone kind of like understands and with which the platform has a lot of infrastructure for.
Nice. And how long has, I guess, Jamal been in development? Like, so you have 2 full levels out right now and a third like demo, Boat World. I guess as a whole, how long has that been in development? And then for each level, how does it break down into like development time?
Mm-hmm. So like maybe it's easier to answer that in reverse. And so each level takes about 1 month to create. And so yeah, about sort of 3 months in total.
They've all been similar. It feels like Color by Buttons is the most advanced one so far, or has they all been about 1 month development time?
They've all been about 1 month. I think this is just because when I was putting together the Boat World level, there was a lot of stuff in the Dream software I was learning for the first time. That was really the first time that I was using gadgets such as the rotator gadget, which is sort of used extensively throughout that level. This was the first time I was really doing searches of sculpts that other members in the Dream community have created, and other things such as like checkpoints, sort of creating one of those, fiddling with the logic. All of these are things which when I began working on the level, I didn't have any idea how to do, but by the end of it, I did. And I think applying that knowledge to the next level, which is Camera World, meant like I saved a significant amount of time. Camera World as well was a 2D level, so that was the first time I was creating anything like that. Actually, sort of implementing that in Dreams, as it turns out, isn't too bad. There's several YouTube videos on it. It kind of essentially involves like placing a tag and then a tag somewhere, and then restricting movement location, and then getting up with the camera. So then, once I sort of figured out how to do camera transitions in sort of 2D levels, moving that then to Color by Buttons world was even easier, because in Color by Buttons world, there's no camera transitions. It's just a fixed camera. It's 2D. I knew how to do that. So the technical challenge there was now how to do like shape detection, like in Color by Buttons world. If the character is in front of an object which can be colored, if you try and color that object and there's a kind of collision, it won't actually sort of appear. And so figuring out how to do that on a large scale that was that didn't depend on using the green detection zones was I think the hardest part of that. In reality, though, that was just like a day kind of trying to figure out the prototype, and then once the prototype for that was working, the rest of it was relatively straightforward.
Nice.
So I guess in summary, it's even though these projects have become sort of more technical, they've all taken about a month.
That's pretty good to hear. How did you come up with the concept for Color by Buttons? It's pretty much, I don't think I've played a platformer quite like it before.
Thanks. That's definitely my aim. I wanted to create like a platformer that like I hadn't created before. I mean, I hadn't played before, and something that was different. So I think with so many of my ideas from games, they start off like being one thing, and then they just slightly get transformed, and then they get transformed into another. Kind of like maybe it's similar to some really like weird sped up version of like Evolution, where there's like really small changes going from like idea to idea, but when you put them together, you get something that looks completely different. Yeah, and so like so when I think about, I guess I should say, generally, when I think about games generally, when I think about sort of what I want to do in a game, I kind of always start with mechanics. I think that sort of the interactions and the mechanics are one of the fundamental things that make games different from other things. And so if I'm creating a game, I want the mechanic to be sort of interesting in some way. I particularly like to explore mechanics that are either new or haven't been explored that often before. So, for example, in camera world, the idea with that is sort of stopping time. While quite a few games have sort of dealt with this, played with this idea of stopping time, sort of, I think most platformers do not. And so similar with Color by Buttons world, I wanted to do something different. I was, so whereas camera was about time, the initial idea for Color by Buttons world was about dimensions. You know, most 2D, 3D games only really operate in 2 or 3 dimensions. And however, some of my favorite games from the last decade had levels in which you were really playing through 4-dimensional levels. So these are games such as Dishonored 2 or Titanfall 2, and also Sayonara Wild Hearts from last year. I think like my favorite levels from all of those games are the ones where you're sort of in multiple dimensions. So I wanted to try making some game where you're actually playing through a 4-dimensional space. Immediately you run into this technical issue of, well, how do you sort of present like a 4-dimensional level in a 3-dimensional space? And for me, like the biggest issue was just sort of just showing where objects are. You know, like in this, I'm slightly sort of hesitant to use Dishonored 2 as an example because I don't want to kind of spoil it for the people who are there. So, but okay, you've been warned. So Dishonored 2, the device for this level kind of allows you to sort of, while you're in one dimension, you're able to see what a portion of the other dimension looks like. Mm-hmm. And so like I thought, surely this is technically impossible to do in Dreams. So I need to come up with something different. You know, how can I represent one world in another?
Yeah.
So I thought, oh, if I simply like represent the outlines of all objects at once, and then sort of only fill in the actual objects which are kind of in the dimension, then players can walk around and maybe they see the outline of a crate or they see the outline of like a tree or something. And they go, okay, like that tree or that crate is in this other dimension, but not in the one I am. But if I switch to it, that's what's going to appear there. I didn't want to just create a game with only sort of like 2 possible worlds to hop between. I wanted to do this for an arbitrary number of worlds. You know, it's sort of at least 4. So then, okay, if you're trying to switch between kind of 4 worlds at once, or sort of 4 levels at once, how do you then sort of communicate which objects live in what dimensions?
Yeah.
If I'm sort of running with the idea of labels on outlines, there needs to be, if I'm dealing with outline idea, there needs to be some way to distinguish the outlines from each other. You know, which outline exactly lies in which part. And so I thought a kind of a crude way of getting around this would simply be to like label with words on each outline which world the object in that outline comes from. Like maybe the tree and the crate say like world 2 on them, and then you go, okay, like I'm currently in world 1 at the moment. These are world 2. This was sort of really clunky idea, and like I wish there would be some way to get around it. And I guess at this stage I was thinking about the kind of the thematic idea for the level as well. Like what sort of, in what theme does this mechanic of being able to like pop between worlds make sense? I then kind of realized the game would be more interesting if you could actually add dimensions together instead of just switching between them. So maybe it's possible to sort of bring all objects from all dimensions into the current space or make them all disappear. And then sort of somehow along this time, the idea of creating like a color by, like I thought of the idea of a color by numbers painting. And I thought, oh, this would actually be a perfect fit for the game. Like in like a color by numbers painting, all of the regions have labels as part of the artwork. So in a similar way, in my game, I could just like label where each of the, you know, like I don't have to deal with the object of having to figure out how to get rid of the labels, because the labels will be there in the first place. And similarly, the idea of popping an object into the world is now sort of natural, since it just corresponds to coloring an object from something being like white before and sort of being blank to now having color. And yeah, that was pretty much that was how the idea for the level came about. So yeah, from thinking about like 4-dimensional levels to suddenly a color by numbers painting.
Nice. Yeah, that's fascinating. And you've also been kind enough to show us some of your early gameplay sketches for colors by buttons. I take it these look like they're digital notes, correct?
Yeah. So I have a tablet, and I kind of use that to do all my sketches and stuff. I find it's useful for like for 3 main reasons. The first is that I can really quickly erase something I wrote and change it. The second is that I can really use this tablet anywhere. So in particular, I can be lying down on my bed and doing it, which I do constantly, or just lying on a couch. I think the third is that it's all digital, so I can easily make copies and then if I sort of, and then I don't need to really worry about losing it. Like the copies won't actually disappear anyway. It's rather just, do I know in which particular folder these things are lying?
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I love digital. Do you love to just sketch all throughout the day whenever something pops in your head, or are you sitting down and focusing solely on game development at any particular time?
I think it's a mixture of both. When I was working on this game, I definitely was like sitting down, going through ideas in my head, and then if the ideas were particularly good, I would. Okay, I think this page here in particular explains quite well this idea well. So this was after I had. Let's see. I think this was after I had done the. So this is after I'd done like the window, like the office part of the game. So I was thinking of like what other aspects to do. The idea of like sort of like a playground sort of came into mind. I thought that, you know, sort of there's a lot of interesting shapes that like playgrounds are composed of. You know, whether this be like swings, like a monkey bar, slides such as this. So I thought, oh, maybe this is. Yeah, so I thought, like, why exactly could it be possible to put these in the games? Well, like first off, all of these shapes are really simple, and since Color by Buttons world is sort of composed pretty much almost essentially entirely composed of like squares and rectangles and stuff, kind of doing that translation of complicated physical real-world object into game object would be sort of easy.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's shapes that everyone kind of recognizes as well. And then there's also this kind of meta thing of, you know, people like play on playgrounds, and, you know, in this game, you know, sort of Jamal is like playing through this playground, and so, you know, the characters are like playing through it at the same time, right? So maybe there's some kind of interesting aspect to that. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, though, I didn't think that all of the objects in the playground are kind of too thin, which means that compared to, say, like the bookshelf or the window, where you can, in the game, where you have these really large patches of objects that can be colored. In this case, everything was really thin. Not only does this add to the difficulty of labeling things clearly or making things look visually different, but everything kind of, the amount of the gameplay puzzles you can design with these then kind of become constrained.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then, yeah, and then I guess perhaps I shouldn't sort of talk too long about sort of each of these ideas in the game, but yeah, the sketch of sort of New York City, when I had the idea to, I mean, I think you can see from the sketch what I did, right? I was exploring with like the Maps app on my tablet, different areas of New York City, and then I selected an interesting one, and then I really started to denote how I would like sculpt that part of this part of the city up into like rectangles and triangles, and so I guess, in almost, I guess like in summary, in almost all of these ideas, like the idea was sort of in my head first, and then there was some filtering that went on in my head as to if it would be good or not. And then if it kind of met all those criteria, I would then put it down on the tablet, and then I would do some more thinking as to whether whether it would be good, and then if I was then finally convinced that it would make a good addition to the game, I then went about creating it in the game.
Nice. So, what does the future hold for you, you think? Is it further development on Jamal's Adventure in Sky, or are you already thinking about other brand new projects?
I definitely want. I'm thinking of like Jamal's Adventure in the Sky as like a trilogy of 2D levels. I've completed a Camera World and Color by Buttons World.
Mm-hmm.
For the next level, I really want to experiment with gravity. I think sort of gravity is another aspect which is not really played within most platformers. Of course, there are many platformers which do play with it, and those which do are some of my favorite. I mean, for instance, I think that the greatest 3D platformer of all time is Super Mario Odyssey. Is not Super Mario Odyssey, but Super Mario Galaxy.
Yeah.
Because I think in that game, beforehand, everyone was used to playing through 3D games where basically in Euclidean geometries, where sort of gravity always goes down, where the play spaces you're in always kind of look like boxes. And then that game said, but spherical geometries exist, and we really should be playing with them. And so suddenly in that game, you were playing, on the surface of spheres, and brilliantly, the game kind of demanded you understand the geometry of spheres in order to progress through that game. Like several of the bosses of that level, which you needed to chase in some way, went at a pace faster than you. And so the only way you could actually collide with them was to sort of think about how they're going to traverse around the sphere, think about where you are in relation to that, and kind of go that way. And then the game also did some really fun things with gravity mechanics. So, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent on how much I love that game. But the fact remains, I think there's a lot of potential for playing for games based around sort of playing with gravity or different ideas. And so I definitely want to create a 2D game where you kind of have to think about how gravity works in order to get around.
Awesome. Have you started the creation process yet, or is it still just
no, it's still I think that's still several months down the line for me.
Okay.
I'm just kind of focusing on teaching and mathematics at the moment.
Nice.
I mean, this said, in terms of, I've thinking in the mathematics direction, I think there's a huge potential for the sort of games as education. And I think like one of the game designers I quite admire is Jonathan Blow, and I was watching one of his talks. Brilliantly, a lot of his talks are uploaded to YouTube, and so you can kind of watch these at any given time. And yeah, in one of these talks, he was talking about games, and then he made this claim that all games are educational. And sort of at first I thought, why is this true? And then I realized that it is. I mean, like as Blake mentioned, it's just that not everyone thinks as games as being educational, because for most people, educational means something that's very similar to school, or something that's directly applicable in real life. And as you sort of mentioned, even for games which some people like to distance themselves from, such as like violent first-person shooters, this kind of thing. When you play these games, you do become sort of really great at like virtually killing people, like compared to when you start playing these things. And so there is that kind of educational thing. You become good at doing what the game is, in what the game's about. And I think that, and so I think sort of at least in my subject in mathematics, the kind of formalism which is required to do mathematics at a high level, unfortunately creeps down through all the grades, right to the very beginning, right down to kindergarten, where instead of asking kids to think about like shapes or geometries or sort of what numbers mean, kids are told that 3 multiplied by 4 is 12 and any other answer is incorrect. And I think this is like a damaging trend that maybe it's sort of impossible to fix in the next generation, or at least significantly improve in the next generation, at least immediately. However, I think that a lot of ideas from mathematics that would only be encountered in typically only encountered in sort of graduate courses are actually can totally be understood at almost all levels, and it's just that formalism is kind of like protecting them. And so I've definitely been thinking about creating a game that sort of teaches the ideas of group theory, but without this formalism. Sort of based, and I think I've got some rough ideas as to how the game is going at the moment, but I'm still just refamiliarizing myself with Cayley graphs, which are like a visual way of representing these groups, and thinking about how the Cayley graphs can be used as can be used to form puzzles, and then how by solving those puzzles you can then sort of understand these properties of Cayley graphs, and then by extension understand these properties of groups. So I guess that's still in the really early stages of planning. Who knows, maybe in a couple of months time I'll decide this is just a foolish project and kind of drop it. But
no, it's a fascinating idea. Especially love the whole education concept. I know the application game I'm making right now it's a simple, like, fun little money management simulator, which it's silly on the surface. It's dealing with basically a parody of like Elon Musk, but it also, in the background, it's really kind of teaching the player how to manage finances, how to reinvest money in order to create a better return on investment and kind of grow your wealth as you play the game. So even though its goal isn't designed to be educational, it's actually still teaching you a lot about how investment works and reinvesting money so it grows in the future and not just letting it stagnate inside a bank account. I think video games as a medium has a amazing opportunity to be educational that we don't really see in even literature or static mediums such as TV or music.
I think it's such a shame. Yet at the same time, I realize that I don't think we can sort of really complain about this unless we're like actively trying to change this. And but I think also I feel like I sort of understand why these haven't really sort of been developed, or the kind of the attempts that have been made to make sort of games educational, like are kind of just have kind of sort of failed. And I'm talking about this sort of like edutainment, which like in my opinion aren't sort of really games per se. They're rather sort of like interactive textbooks dressed up with lots of, in many cases sort of brilliant like animation and like voiceovers and sound effects and stuff. But yeah, if they're not inherently using the strength of the medium to sort of teach through sort of attempting things, then are they really that educational? It's like
it's a great philosophical question on game development. But
I find it interesting that you would actually like characterize your app as sort of like not educational, because it sounds to me like it's like it's precisely doing that. It's like because I also think as well that like you don't necessarily need to have as a goal that sort of the game teach someone something that's teach something to someone that has a very real connection to something in real life in order for it to be quote unquote educational. I think if you can convey a concept which does exist in the real life, but which people may not have considered before, then sort of introducing that concept and talking about that concept in something like a game is very educational.
Yeah, no, you put it well. I think that's why edutainment kind of games struggle to be successful, because they're just trying to use the same formula of teaching, but just in like a video game form. So you will have the typing simulators and the math. The kids hit like 4 plus 4 equals 8 or whatever, and those are fine. But when we can change the way we teach, when we change the idea of the concept of teaching, it's not just straightforward A plus B equals C, but rather we teach it without being so direct. I guess it's kind of like in the background, like we introduce physics or gravity without being so direct about it, and it's just more like immersed in the concept without being directly shoved down your throat, I guess. Allows people to actually absorb the ideas and concepts without realizing it.
I guess like potentially I just like I can't help but think of Kerbal Space Program as a
Yes, great
like
example.
as an example where I mean I honestly I honestly believe that if you want to learn about astrophysics, you will learn more by playing 50 hours of that game than you will taking like several astrophysics courses
Yep.
at like university. Otherwise, it is such a good game. It is so good, and I think I think one of the reasons behind that is that it doesn't like I think as you mentioned it's not like forcing people to it's not forcing memorization. It's rather
Mm-hmm.
it's like there's a bunch of these tools available, and then it sort of asks the player, you know, maybe try doing this, or ignore us. Like do whatever you want. Just try playing around with these things.
Experimentation.
And then exactly. And then, like the moments in the game where you do actually when you have launched a ship and then you have actually sort of launched it and then sort of directed its like chosen the point in which you want to sort of burn to like escape the sort of escape Earth, and then when you actually sort of get around to the moon and start orbiting the moon, all of these things just feel amazing, and I think in large part because you kind of did this yourself. It like the game doesn't give you a huge like list of steps and say, in 10 seconds time you'll do this, and then in 10 seconds time you'll do this. Like in some of the tutorials sort of are like that, but the purpose of the tutorial is just to enable you to do that when you want. And then when you're actually outside of the tutorials and you have this ability, then you have these like basic abilities. You can then start combining those basic abilities to do some really cool things.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yeah, it's great. It's building blocks, and fantastic example for how to be educational without being an education game. But yeah, so I'm also curious. So you're not developing the third level Jamal's Adventure in the Sky just yet, but you are working on sort of a two-part documentary to showcase the game development process of Color by Buttons. Tell us a little bit about that and what made you want to make a little documentary about yourself.
Yeah, I was like, I feel like maybe like documentary is assigning a production value to it, which will very very easily surpass what the end production quality of it will be. I guess I just wanted to like document my creative process, like for myself and anybody else who was interested. Like I find like whenever I'm creating anything, for the first couple of days once I've made it, I have a good idea of all of the steps I took to make this thing. But several months later, I will have forgotten most of these, if not all of them. And so I definitely want to, or at least, or maybe sort of, or at least maybe just not forget, but like my understanding of them might change and might be different to what they were at the time. And so I think it's important for me just to document this thing. I think also to like there's not too many concise examples of how projects were made. Like I think there's a kind of spectrum where Yeah, there are some like, feature film like documentaries made about game creation processes of various sorts. And I think for these ones, if you're trying to fit an entire 2 years of development, or at least 2 years of development into roughly 90 minutes, you obviously cannot go into the kind of detail by detail regarding every decision. Likewise, whereas many people these days, or at least many indie devs who are working on stuff, may stream their entire creative process on Twitch. How many people have the time to sit through, like 6 months, if not more, of 8-hour Twitch streams when they work on this?
Yeah.
No one, pretty much.
Exactly.
And so then so I kind of wanted just to make something of sitting between these two things. And I think that since Color by Buttons World only took a month to make, it meant that I can go into like a lot of detail regarding, how I came up with these ideas, some of the challenges with them, and yet at the same time not worry about the video becoming enormously long, and also without just skipping some of the crucial details in the creative process.
Nice.
So yeah, it's still part of me thinks that part of me feels like I've underestimated the amount of work it would take to put this video together. I thought I'd be able to do it by the end of October. I think I think I'll, in the meantime, I want to just make a video documenting ideas about another puzzle, and then that will allow me to like refamiliarize myself with like video editing software. That's like a really small project. Once that's out of the way, I'll then be able to adequately jump into this project where I just assemble all of the ideas I had for Color by Buttons World and present it in a coherent way.
Nice. So for anyone out there watching who might be inspired to create something like you have, but might be intimidated by the initial learning curve or scope required to create games and dreams, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to recognize is that the kind of like the learning curve is there, but your idea of it is probably incorrect. And like I don't mean this in sort of any offensive way. It's rather that I think if you spend like a long time looking at like a mountain range sort of in the background, it's really easy to think that the mountain range is extremely steep and horrible. If you sort of get to the base of the mountain range, in so many cases you realize that it's actually, it's really not that steep at all. And at least for me, I thought, at least sort of in dreams, and also like talking, going sort of earlier into our conversation, even with like the programming in Pygame, yes, I did have some programming experience under my belt. However, I thought that creating the game in Python was going to take at least several months. It turned out it was really only like somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I think likewise in dreams, I think a lot of people think that creating a game in dreams is going to be like super difficult. It's beyond my capabilities. That's totally false. Everybody absolutely has the ability to make like a 5-hour, sorry, not a 5-hour, at least like a 5-minute game in dreams. And I think the easiest way to do this is, if you sort of have the software to try one of the media molecule remixing exercises where they kind of give you the basis for a game, and then they say, have fun, like experiment with this. And yeah, I think in particular the clone tool is just amazing. It's, part of me thinks that the majority of game creation is just due to the clone tool.
Yeah.
If you have the ability to sort of replicate something, you can then, it just makes creation so easy. And yeah, and I guess, yeah, this was like I wrote a letter to Edge magazine, um, just kind of summarizing not sort of like not summarizing, but I think containing several of my thoughts around this process of making something in dreams. And then like in the next issue of the magazine, somebody wrote back essentially said, oh yeah, I really like sort of Benjamin's kind of like sort of like not I don't want to say the word inspiring, but it was like I really liked his sort of account of like making things in dreams, and like it sounded really cool. And this person said, but like I don't think I'm able to I'll like be smart enough, or like I'll be competent enough to sort of make these things. So I was like, no, like I don't think you understood the purpose of this article, or at least not, or at least like it wasn't his fault. It was my fault for not making it more clear that just making games in dreams requires work, but requiring work is completely different to being difficult. And I think that, like, at least for me, if you spend some time making something in dreams, it very quickly becomes apparent that it's possible to make a lot of things just quite quickly, and sure, like maybe have some really wild ideas about sort of what to do. 80% of those wild ideas is probably something you can implement in dreams from the very beginning. And so I think just like there's still this barrier of people like thinking that they're able to do something that I'm not sure can ever really be broken by anyone other than the given person. Actually like taking that first step. But
it's a mental barrier. It's not, the physical barrier has been lowered enough to surpass, but that mental barrier is still there for the user.
yeah, like I think a lot of people think, like making a game is going to be something like as arduous as swimming across the English Channel. And then I think dreams is like, actually no, you can make a game by just swimming this pool. But some people are like, yeah, but I don't want to jump in the pool. And then if the pool is really deep, this is totally valid. But I think many people, at least in my case, I jump into the pool in dreams, and then I realize the pool is actually only a couple of feet deep. And then I think, oh, this is amazing. I can actually just, I can swim to the end, or I can actually walk. It's not that bad. And then, in my case, sort of a month later, I had created like the art escape room. And then I thought, okay, if I can do this, I feel like I can really make I can quite easily make a platform in dreams. And sure enough, that's happened. So yes, please, like if you're listening and you still have doubts about whether you're able to make something, just invest like 5 to 10 hours. That's all it requires. Just doing one of the media molecule exercises, or just playing around with the tools. I think very quickly you'll realize that it's actually that's not too bad. It's a lot more. You can attack the problem a lot more readily than you may have thought, and then it's just a matter of time. It's after that it's then just a matter of thinking, okay, yeah, I can make this thing, and so when do I want to make it? And asking the question of when do I want to make it is so much easier to answer than can I make it?
No, that's some fantastic advice, and hopefully it does inspire future people to get over that mental barrier and start getting into game development just as a hobby. Is there anything else you might like to mention or talk about before we say goodbye?
I guess I just wanted to say thank you for creating this like podcast channel, and doing something new as well, which is to actually document the experiences of people making sort of games or like animations or sort of art for this platform.
It really is an art form, and that's the whole purpose of the channel, is to kind of put a spotlight on these fantastic creators and developers, because it's now something people can literally do in their house during COVID. You don't have to create a 100-person developer studio to make something amazing. So, thank you. Thank you for joining us. This has been a fantastic discussion about dreams, education, abstract game mechanics. And so
thanks for having me.
Of course. We're welcome to have you back in the future if you create any more levels or wacky gameplay concepts. For now, though, we will have InDreams links in the comments below, so you all can play Benjamin's fantastic creations, and also check out his YouTube channel, where hopefully you can watch his greater in-depth developer diaries in the future. In the meantime, though, as always, sweet dreams.